wee while ago, like, isn't it?
Yeah,
2017.
it's a whole pandemic ago.
A whole pandemic ago. That's one way of putting it.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I might start using that as like a measurement of units of time from now on.
yep.
One pandemic ago. I love it. Um, but I'm all set up, and I believe we are going. Hopefully, it's picking you up as well. That would be lovely. Um, so yeah, everybody, welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today, I'm here with Mark Steadman. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, as I was saying, yeah, I first found you by subscribing to your email list, and then I think around the same time I discovered Podium, which was my first podcast platform, the one that I used when I first kicked off this show all those many moons ago. So yeah, man. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about Podium and how you got that started and like why you decided, what must have been 7, 8 years ago that you started this? You decided that podcasts were the business that you were gonna pitch into.
Well, I was into podcasting. I made my first podcast in 2008, and I got and I shortly thereafter I started producing for other people and really loved the medium and just furiously experimented and developed new shows, new formats. I've got a cat that's just decided right now he's going to play with my carpet.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Dear me. Yeah, I experimented with new formats all the time. In 2010, I had a zombie themed comedy panel show, which was a little bit high concept, but it was a lot of fun. And in 2014, I started a podcast network with a small group of friends, and we had a few shows, and it got me to go to Atlanta in Georgia to I sort of made a friend that I slept on his couch kind of thing, and that was fun. So it kind of took me on some little adventures, and then in 2016, I left my job and I was doing all sorts of stuff. I would sort of do anything digital that paid. And so I was reading audiobooks and making websites and apps, which is what I'd been doing previously. And then also I thought I really want to get into editing podcasts and getting paid to do so. Just a couple of years after Serial had exploded. And so I, put myself out there as an audio editor and got a little bit of work. And then almost all of my work has come through that one client because, he recommended me and it spread. And then at the end of the year, I was working on a show and I'd been hosting with a company and wasn't super satisfied with what was happening. There were just some technical difficulties. And because I was a techie, that I was sort of dissatisfied with that. So I thought, I've done this before. I did it with the hosting, with the podcast network I set up, which I disbanded earlier in the year. So it's like, I have all the code. I know how all this stuff works. Why don't I give it another go and try and run an actual hosting service? And I started it up. It was originally pay what you can. We pivoted to a community tier and then a professional tier. And started sort of open the doors properly in 2017, and then it became my full-time job in 2018, and then in the spring of 2021, it got to the point where I kind of thought I've taken this as far as I can, and it's maybe time to see what else I can do. And so I had a conversation with the company Castos, who acquired the business and took care of the customers, because that was my big concern. I'd spoken to other people as well who weren't, they wanted to acquire the company but weren't looking to acquire the customers and didn't want to take care of them and stuff. So that's sort of from where I am to now, which is running. I'm still writing, still ostensibly writing to the same list that I was writing to back in 2017 when you subscribed, but helping people launch and grow podcasts and understand the medium better and feel good and confident in what they make. So that's me.
Well, that's quite a comprehensive history. I mean, well, I asked, so.
You talk now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fascinating. So, I mean, that must have been. What was it like giving up something that you, like a company that you'd worked so hard on? Because I mean, not everyone ever gets to be in that position. They can have, say, like a hobby that they work on or something, and they like put their project together, and or I don't know, maybe like a project at work, but they're never like building something that is like absolutely theirs, their name stamped on it, and then has to go, well, I'm gonna like give that up. I mean, like, what's that like?
I think because I was kind of ready to at that point. I think if it had been someone who'd come along and backed a truck full of money up to my driveway and said, "Do you want to take a look inside the truck?" I might have felt differently, and I probably would have felt, okay, I would have had a truck full of money and been able to swim around in it like Scrooge McDuck. But I think I would have felt maybe like there was more that I could have done, and because it was the best thing I'd ever done, and so to get to that point was difficult, but not that impossible, because I just realized, like, I've been pushing this boulder up this hill to try and grow this thing, and like I know how to make it, I know how to look after my customers, I know how to communicate with customers, and work with people who are also good at that, and I know the industry, but that doesn't mean that you can scale, what is essentially a software as a service product. And that's a whole different thing and takes a lot of time and energy and talent. And those were things that I just didn't know how to do. And so, it was hard to let it go, but it was kind of it was the right decision, and still feels like the right decision.
Okay, I mean, like, how much experience did you have in like the business world? So yeah, I mean, it's a real question, because a lot of people who end up in positions where, especially these days, where people like creators are building their own little things all over the place, and then they get to a moment where it crosses over and it stops being like a hobby, and it starts being their business. And that transition is weird, I think, for a lot of freelancers, especially when it goes from like a side hustle to their full-time gig. But then even from that to go from being self-employed to running a company, like, who taught you anything, or was it literally just like flying by the seat of your pants? I mean, your
the B one, the one from the B column mostly. I mean, like, all the stuff apart from the business stuff. I mean, I've been a freelancer I've been on and off freelancing for years, and I actually left because I rejoined a job that I'd previously left in order to start up another software venture, and that was a social sort of citizen journalist social network thing, and didn't quite pan out. But so I knew some of the ropes. And I knew the ropes in terms of the software as a service stuff. But and I knew cash flow, I knew all that kind of stuff, and making sure that you're making ends meet, and what is acceptable risk and all that kind of stuff. But what I didn't know, and I think is difficult to teach, is building an audience, which I was lucky in that I was able to do that, but I didn't know how. That felt like alchemy, and luck and a bit of timing or whatever, because I could so easily have built the thing and no one turned up, but we got to a point where there were thousands of people using the platform. And that was kind of, to a degree, lightning in a bottle that's really hard to take. But I think you can, like, this, a lot of it is learnable, a lot of it is teachable, but I think some of it is just I was going to say it's better experienced, and I think if you can do that, what you want to be able to do is experience the highs and lows, but not have that be dependent on whether you can make rent. Because if you are taking up all of your mental cycles, worrying about when the next pay packet is due or how you're going to pay your mortgage, then you're not being able to focus on what it is that you're building. And that wasn't that much of a problem for me, but it is something that I've become aware of. So I don't know if I'm that helpfully answering your question, but because the short answer is like, no one taught me, and I had to build my parachute on the way down.
No, I mean, that's the honest answer. Then that's the honest answer, you know? It's not, yeah, it's not a bad answer. I mean, that's probably reassuring to many people, reassuring to myself, especially as well. I mean, like, I'm in a position where I'm figuring out like how I make this thing like a little bit more of like my full-time gig, essentially, whilst having a full-time gig, which is fine. Like, I mean, I love it, and that's great, but it's a real, like, so sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, it's like, even with this podcast, like, I'm totally unsure as to like where to go with it. Like, I'm like figuring out as it goes, but it's completely like, I have no idea what's beyond like a few episodes, or, you know, the some people I've spoke to. Like, it could all fall apart tomorrow, but it's a weird one.
That's the spirit.
I haven't been cancelled yet, so that's fine. Here's hoping. No. But like, do you have did you have a mentor of any form, like someone that you would have like gone to for I don't know, advice in business?
Not then, but I do now, and that's one of the best decisions that I made, is to have someone that I could work with. I now have a coach. I mean, even even 2 years ago, that would have been an absolute, like, that would have been an anathema to me. Like, what are you talking about, coach? Come on. But I do have someone that I can turn to, and it's someone who kind of keeps me honest and keeps me accountable. And it's someone where, if I think about, because one of the things that's very easy if you have a certain type of brain, a certain type of, I guess, problem solving brain, is you can get the dopamine hit from solving a problem, but it's not the problem that needs to be solved at that time. You know, the problem that might need to be solved at that time is you need more customers, or you need to fix this problem, this low-hanging fruit that you know how to solve, but it's boring to solve, but it'll make your customers happy, but it's boring. Versus like, you've had an idea for something, you can get that quick sort of dopamine hit by acting on that and solving that particular problem, and that feels great. But you can easily get into a rut of doing that, and then you realize you've made no headway on the business side. You know, you've got a great product, but you've not, you know, done much on the business side. And that was my part of the mistake that I made, because I was working on my own. And I didn't have someone who could sort of keep me honest and keep an eye on me, or someone that I could report to and say, like, you said you were going to do X amount of things this week to increase your customer base, or to grow, or to get the word out, or whatever. Have you done any of those things? And I could go, no, but I did rebuild the RSS parser so that this thing now happens and it goes to this JSON feed. And it's like, okay, cool. I did that. How does that increase your business? Well, it doesn't, but it makes the product nicer. Yeah, but does it, you know, bring new people in? And so there's this thing in is the famous book by I think he was an Olympic rower, which is has this concept of, does it make the boat go faster? So when they were training, this Olympic rowing team were training, and the question that would govern any decision that the team made is, will it make the boat go faster? So if someone's contemplating having a kebab, will it make the boat go? No, probably not make the boat go faster. No. If we get up at 5 a.m. and train really hard, will it make the boat go faster? Yeah, it will eventually. And so when you start to think in those terms, that really helps. But you need someone that can help do that, because it's really, really hard to do that on your own.
Did you go?
Certainly my experience, anyway.
Yeah. Did you go? Was it someone you knew? Was it someone you knew before, or did you go? Oh,
It was.
Find them, and was it a
Yeah.
conscious decision, or did it sort of happen by accident?
It was very much a conscious decision. I was sat on my sofa last summer thinking, I know my tendencies. I know what I'm like. I'm building a new business now, which is a sort of blog and a membership site for people that want to use podcasting to further their message. And so I was sat there thinking, like, I know what I'm like. I know I could build a bunch of stuff and not make the boat go faster. And so I need someone who can help keep me accountable. And I put the word out, and it just so happens that someone I'd met at a public speaking event that I used to run says, well, I'm a coach. Let's have a chat. And we did. And you know, we meet up on Zoom every week. And so, yeah, it was absolutely a conscious decision. And it came about because I learned about the power of having sort of a mastermind, or having a group of people that you can turn to, you know. So even if a coach doesn't feel like the right thing, what is really good is to have a buddy group or have an accountability group. And, you know, these are things that I think you can find online. There's places like Indie Hackers, Indie Worldwide, which is a Slack community. You know, if you can start to make friends with people who are doing stuff in the same kind of space, that you can find these people and just meet up and be accountable to each other. That kind of stuff can really, really help if you don't feel like a coach is something that you want to do, because that feels like a whole thing. And I get it. There's a barrier there, but sometimes just getting a mastermind together and knowing that, like, I've got to rock up at this group, you know, every Wednesday or whatever. And I said that I was going to do something, and I want to make sure that I've delivered. And you know, so there's so many reasons why that's a good way to go.
Yeah, when you say mastermind, like it sounds like a great idea. In my head, I'm imagining the brain trust in Scrubs.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, for people who are maybe still thinking, it's like, whoa, what? I don't know, the life coach thing can sound so cliche and so, I don't know, just, you know, airhead in California. It's like, well, you know, my life coach told me that I need to drink more cucumber water. So that's what I'm, you know, that's what people imagine. Like, have you got like a good example, like, of how this is functioned, like, in the real world?
Yeah, it's super practical. I mean, for one thing, she's Dutch, so like she's pretty direct. And so she will, she will sort of say, like, how is this thing that you're doing helping? Have you thought about this? And sometimes it's about getting a sort of a nice pick me up or a nice pep talk. If I need it, if I'm feeling down, if I'm feeling a lack of confidence, which is so often the case, I can get someone who's, well, look at the stuff you've done. You know, let's look at what you need to do, but also let's look at what you've done. And no, there's no mung beans, there's no lemongrass, there's no nothing's herbal. She hasn't switched me to a vegan diet yet. You know, none of that stuff comes in. It is really just about, what is it you want to achieve, and how do we get you there, and how do we keep regularly just checking in, and that is what it is. Like you, I had this idea of what a life coach would be, and it's not that at all. It is someone who can look at your progress each week and help you map out your progress, and help you, you know, if you've got a huge thing to do. It's like eating an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And they help you line up those bites and figure out, like, where the cutlery is or whatever. Like, metaphors getting away from me, but that's what they do. And yeah, there's no almond milk involved, unless you want almond milk.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's nice. I mean, I don't like it in coffee. I don't know what it is. It spoils.
I haven't drunk milk in coffee in about 8 years now.
Oh,
I
I
mean, my
know.
mum hasn't remembered that. My mum still asks me if I want milk, but you know.
Are you one of these people who who tried the bullet coffees when they were super
I
popular?
absolutely did. I did when I went that time I went keto. I did give the bulletproof coffee a go. It's,
Bulletproof
I
coffee. That's it.
mean,
Yeah.
it's like butter. I mean, that was a joke in The Simpsons. Um,
All right. Yes.
Marge and Homer are in bed, and Homer is complaining that Marge let him get fat, and she said, "I'm not the one who puts butter in your coffee." And then that's literally what you do with bulletproof coffee. It's butter and coconut milk and cream. It's mental. It's delicious though.
Really? I never tried it. I do coconut
Yeah.
oil in my coffee.
Ooh, I can dig it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was just because I read a thing, and this is one of those things that, you just like read something and try it, and like, this seems better, and you've no idea if it actually is. I read in one of Tim Ferriss's books, I cannot remember which one, maybe the 4 Hour Work Week, maybe something else. But he was like, yeah, I discovered that I was like really tired even after my coffee. And I discovered that coconut oil helped me like have more energy through the day and made my brain work better. I was sharper. And I was like, I'll try it. And I tried it. And I felt maybe a bit sharper. I don't know if that's just complete placebo, if I'm totally making it up. But there you go.
Yes, all right.
Options
there if you want it.
I bet there's loads of great things that were discovered that way. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So you talked about building an audience a little bit earlier there, and you mentioned this thing about alchemy, about like, is it like is it storm in a bottle? We have a cat on screen. Lovely.
He's very disruptive today.
Well, it's all right.
He's usually quite well behaved, but today he's being very disruptive.
It's all right. I mean, oh. Yeah, well, I mean, the YouTube channel that I believe is subscribed to most by the people who are subscribed to this channel is Roaring Kitty. So there you go. It suits.
There you
go. Anyway, yeah, but so the storm in a bottle, the alchemy, the lightning, and that's what it's like. What you were talking about, trying to build an audience or build your customer base or build your product, and. Is it just alchemy and luck and timing and a little bit maybe of talent? Like, is it like 90% just like catching the moment?
It's more than we like to admit. I don't know the actual ratio, but it's definitely more than a lot of people like to admit, I think. Timing is such a big thing. But I liken it to this. Luck is like, whether you want to call it luck, you want to call it fortune or providence, whatever. Luck is like, in the cartoons you get someone turns on a hose and the hose is left unattended and it just like spirals wildly around with water spraying everywhere. That's luck. And your job is to pop up in the garden up through as many different mole hills and holes as you can in order to get hosed. And that's basically what you're trying to do, is trying to be in the path of that hose pipe as much as possible, because it will just go everywhere. And all you can do is just be in the places where it's going to be. And that means showing up, and that means showing up regularly. And that's why people talk about consistency. They don't use that weird metaphor, but that's why people talk about consistency when it comes to the content that you put out, because it is about showing up and, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take and all that. Like, all those cliches exist because the difficult thing that we don't reckon with often is how prosaic and kind of dull and simple any kind of audience building is. You can't do it quickly. You can do it quickly if you're lucky, and I got lucky once, or I got the timing right once, or it was like whatever it was. I spoke to the right people at the right time, that it was good, and it was backed by a good product. It was backed by something I could stand by. But yeah, that is, I think, like I said, luck backed by a good product. But yeah, it's it is definitely a factor. And there's all sorts of other things that get woven into that, like privilege and all sorts of stuff. And so I think if you recognize that, but you show up and you try and work consistently, then that is how this kind of stuff gets built by normal people.
So you're like I wouldn't say old school podcaster, but you've been around since like the earlier days of the format, right? Should we put it that way?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay, because I mean, when did you first discover the format actually in its beautiful infancy?
In its actual like name that we call it now, probably 2005. Because I think one of the first, because the actual format itself was invented, the technology, if you like, was invented in 2004, which is the year I graduated uni. When I graduated uni, I was doing on-demand radio stuff because the BBC had I think they just called it the BBC Radio Player at the time, and they had their Listen Again service. So this was this revolutionary thing where you could any of the radio programs that were on, you could click a button and you could hear that specific program again in a little pop-up player on your desktop. And I ended up building something like that with a very simple system as part of a uni project. And so I'd been kind of, messing around with on-demand audio in that kind of format, but it wasn't formalized until later. And so then, like, I can't remember if it was the Ricky Gervais show or there was a podcast by my then favorite band, Bare Naked Ladies. I think they had a show early on. There was one or two of those that I subscribed to very early in my on Winamp on my Windows XP machine, and that's how I started falling in love with it. But I'm kind of annoyed at myself, kind of kicking myself that it didn't even occur to me to start until about 3 years later. In America, they have a different tradition. They have this ham radio tradition. They have their speech radio is very different. They also have like open access TV stuff. Like, I think that kind of on-ramp feels a lot smoother, or if you like, or a lot less steep for Americans, which is obviously, where podcasting originated. Whereas for us, we had the BBC, and you must come correct if you're going to think about turning on a mic and spreading your message. I think that's a part of it, and so I kind of fell into that, and I thought, no, I shouldn't. I can't. I wouldn't make a podcast. What would I make a podcast about? And now people just pick up their phone and go, I'm just going to spit some words into my phone and call it a podcast.
Yeah. I mean, like this show.
You've got preparation. You've got a Zoom link and everything.
I know.
That sounded like damning with faint praise. I didn't mean that.
No, don't worry. I mean, I've even got books sometimes that I read. This isn't for this one. This is an upcoming sneak preview. People, China Unbound with Joanna Tree. I think I've pronounced that correctly. Probably not, but she can scold me about it in person. So you could have been getting $100 million from Spotify and going into wars with CNN. Like, that could have been you.
I think I think maybe I would have had an agreement with the Guardian and then had a quiet disagreement and disappeared. That's probably what would have happened.
But you're definitely right. Like, the culture around podcasting in the US is definitely a little bit different, and I've noticed that, especially in that. In Britain, a lot of the most popular shows are all quite corporate, and that's not necessarily a stab. I mean, it could be interpreted as a stab, and I would say it's probably a stab in most cases, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad, right? Because there's some great stuff.
What is corporate? What is corporate to you?
So, like, to me, I would mean that. The difference is, in Britain, a lot of the top shows are produced by an institution or a podcast network or a media company. Whereas in America, a lot of the big shows tend to be individuals who have built up something themselves, or it's like...
Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, that might just be my perception of it.
Yeah, because I would challenge that. I think it's
Maybe that's just who I'm listening to. Maybe.
Yeah, quite possibly, because I'd argue it's just as corporate in America. It's just that there are so much more. I'm struggling with the grammar there. There are so many more podcasts in America that it is easier to make an independent choice. And so if you're into, whether it's tech or whatever, especially tech minded shows, whether it's MKBHD or it's Accidental Tech Podcast or it's, Relay FM, who make a lot of tech based podcasts, they're a network, but they're not, I wouldn't call them corporate. But in the wider space, I would say it's maybe even a little more corporate than it is in the UK.
Maybe I'm just looking at the wrong sorts of people. Maybe I'm thinking about it like in terms of the big podcast like icons. Whereas in the UK, I find that people who are big media personalities then have a show that tends to be quite widely listened to. Say someone like James O'Brien has his show, or I can't even remember what it's called, but a lot of people have
Unfiltered.
Unfiltered. Maybe it was Unfiltered. And then,
he's had a couple,
yeah,
but because he's had the radio show, so he's kind of pivoted that way.
Yeah. So, but I guess my point is that like I feel like people have become, they are stars, and then they have that as a side thing. Whereas in America, it tends to be a lot of people who have become big because of that, like the Joe Rogans, the Adam Carollas, the people like that have really become huge personalities just from that show. Maybe even like you could consider some comedians in that vein, like Tim Dillon, Dave Smith. That sort of
Mark Maron, Mark Maron was in that early guard as well, and that's how how things work for him.
Well, actually,
yeah, Chris Hardwick. There's a few in that sort of 2008-ish rush, I think, that sort of have done very well, but they are able to do that because they were there then. Adam Carolla. Another, like, he's a proper OG. He's been doing that for a long time. And Joe Rogan, I think, was the same, was doing it for a long time. And so, I think it would be really hard to be able to do that now. I think it is really, really hard to sort of to establish yourself as because when they started, podcasting wasn't that big, so they could be a big fish in a small pond. Now the pond is so much bigger; it's really hard, I think, to sort of rock up and be like, all right, I'm gonna own this piece, because it's a lot of fish. Yeah. There's a lot of fish, and it's a very big pond now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a stupid goal I've set myself, but here we are.
Well, listen, you look at I can't remember how long MKBHD is, and if you don't know who I'm talking about, he's a tech YouTuber, and he started. Oh God, I can't remember. I mean, he's a young lad anyway, but when he started, he was a very young. He was a boy. He was a young boy, and he had a tiny little webcam on his computer. Really, low quality, and he was just there reviewing whatever he had, and he just kept building and building and building, and now he has this stunning studio, and he has a small team, and he's an independent, but he's sweated it and just worked really, really hard and been really talented at it, and I guess it's really hard to do that, especially with, having a life and a job and all that kind of stuff. It's, I think you have to do that to the exclusion of almost everything else. And that takes a certain type of mindset.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to get obsessed with things. I'm very bad at saying, once it's like, I took over this tiny little bar in Austria, and I was like not content with just making it run well. I was like, it's going to be the greatest bar in the world. And I do claim that for 2 years it was the greatest bar in the world. But so now I've moved on to the podcast. Now I'm like, well, I mean, there's no point in stopping until I have the greatest podcast in the world. I mean, I'm not really sure I'm capable of that.
I don't know. I mean, I like that. It's just it might take a bit longer than it might take to build a bar up. I don't know.
Probably
because audio is a slow growth medium. It's one of the things that I'm realizing more and more and more. It's like,
well, I mean, we are have on video here because this is going on YouTube.
Yes.
So at least that helps. I think the video side is definitely growing a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think I tend to focus on the audio because of just sort of my interests, and that's where most podcasting is audio. But yeah, I've ground to a halt there because I don't actually have a point.
That's all right. So
you drive.
I no problem. I had a point where we were going somewhere with this.
Thank God for that.
So essentially, the point I was hoping we would eventually get towards was that you're an old school podcast dude, and then since then we've had
I remember that
Web 2, and now we've got like people touting like Web 3 and podcasting 2.0, and like, yeah, what do you make of all of this? And what is it? First off, actually.
Oh, brilliant question. I'm actually in the process of writing a great big blog post, which will be on the said email newsletter, about what podcasting 2.0 is and why it's relevant for busy people who have got lives. It's my job to sort of know all of the things, but it's not every podcaster's job to have to care about that stuff. So those two things you mentioned, we've got Web 3 and podcasting 2.0. Web 3 is largely, in my opinion, as an old school web guy who lived through Web 1.0 and 2.0, I kind of think, and even the fact that everybody's writing it, like when they write Web 3, they're writing it in the same way. It's basically a shibboleth. It's basically it's a phrase that I think is something that denotes a club. And if you know the right Web 2, because no one knows what Web 3 is, but it is a way of saying, if you talk about Web 3, then you're in our gang. And I think it's a way that certain people can sort of say, if you're not talking about Web 3, then you're no longer relevant, whereas no one can actually define. They know it's something to do with blockchain, maybe it's something to do with VR and the metaverse, maybe. I don't know. So that's kind of my take on Web 3. It's just a phrase that people can use to call themselves the in-group and to differentiate themselves.
They know. They're the ones that know. We should listen to them, and they know, and that's all we should ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. It's like looking at redundant in the dictionary. It says C redundant. What is Web 3? Well, it's Web 3, mate. If you don't, can't help you if you don't know.
I keep hearing it's the future,
man. That's it. What's Web 3? It's the future. Mm-hmm. Podcasting 2.0 is an initiative that was created by one of the co-creators of podcasting, Adam Curry, who used to be a VJ for MTV. And he persuaded a chap to make some tech changes that enabled podcasting to happen back in 2004. And then in 2020, following this is my understanding of the potted history anyway. In 2020, he became more concerned with Apple making decisions about what it would allow in and out of its database, its podcasting directory, which a lot of more and more apps now have splintered away from the Apple Podcasts directory, but it's still, I think, regarded as kind of the place, the sort of directory of all podcasts. And Apple started making decisions based on policy violations, namely by Alex Jones. I think that might have been the lighting the blue touch paper incident.
It always starts with Alex Jones, doesn't it?
Doesn't it always? I wish it would end with him.
No, that's if everything ends with Alex Jones being right, we have had the worst end to humanity that was possible.
No, you're right. Yeah, no. Bad times. Yes. So I kind of think it was spurred on by that. And so I think it was enough was enough for Adam. And so he sort of ended up spearheading two initiatives. One of them is the Podcast Index, which is an open index of podcasts. Everyone is accepted. No one is censored. What I like about that is because there have to be, I think, in a society, we have to look at free speech and just keep an eye on it, and make decisions about public safety and all that kind of stuff. We speak now as we're a couple of weeks out of the furore that was the Joe Rogan COVID misinformation thing, right? So,
Yes.
As we speak now, that still has sort of echoes of relevance. But they wanted a place to say all podcasts, you can be listed here. It has a great benefit because it's actually surprisingly a pain in the backside to get listed on Apple Podcasts, because if you don't have an Apple device, it is actually not easy. And I think they're quite happy with that. Whereas the podcast index, it's super easy to get in. And apps can self-censor. Apps can decide, I want to block certain content, I want to block certain feeds, but they're not removed from the index. And that's great. And then the other initiative as part of that is something called the podcast namespace, which is a bunch of tech jargon to help podcast apps understand content better. So we can do things like specify transcripts. We can say these are the people that were involved in a podcast in making it. We can say this is the location that it was that it related to, and that's information that we can put in our podcast metadata, basically, that apps can then read and present to listeners. And so those are the two things. I'm very heartened by what they're trying to do, especially with with the podcast namespace, because I think the more that we can understand and the more we can get into granular metadata with podcasts, the more we can aid people being able to leapfrog from show to show. I love the idea that, if a listener has enjoyed me rambling on, then they might be able to just tap my name and here's other stuff that I've guested on, or here's stuff that I've presented, or whatever. And that's enabled by what they're trying to do. The problem we have is one of adoption, and I've got some theories on that which are possibly half-baked, to do with attitudes, and I think it's quite psychological. They're old school podcasters, and I think they still think in old school sort of mindsets. They're very tech forward, all of the apps that support most of their stuff. We haven't even got into the Bitcoin of it all, because there's a lot of Bitcoin stuff involved.
Yeah. I'm hoping we'll get to that.
Okay, cool. Put a pin in that. Yeah, they are. I think I would like to see them perhaps embrace some of the realities of the industry that we have it now, rather than trying to keep things a certain way and for a certain group of people. And they're not doing anything bad or wrong. They're not being jerks about it. It's nothing like that. I just think there is an attitudinal thing. They've got an attitude towards podcasting that they've kept since 2004. And I think the medium has evolved. And yeah, so as I say, half-baked ideas, but hopefully something I'll be able to actually commit to words and make them make sense soon.
Yeah, I mean, so would you say that they're maybe a little bit caught in the sort of underground pirate radio, our little secret corner of the internet sort of thing?
Yes.
The early podcasts were very much like, and now that the format has kind of blown up. Potentially
yes.
in the absence of radio, or I don't know what the reason for it is, but it's blown up, and now they kind of haven't accepted it.
Yes, I think with my media studies university degree hat on, I think it's about subcultures. I think podcaster used to be a subculture. Oh, it still is. Podcaster, with a capital P, it was an internet subculture back in the days when the internet was full of subcultures, whether it was neo-goth or whatever. People congregated and identified themselves, and it gets very in-group and out-group. You're part of our group, and that's, I think, the idea. That's still the base that they're playing to, and you see it in the kinds of apps that get developed. They're almost all Android apps. They've got a lot of Bitcoin stuff, because it's the sort of slightly hacker mindset, which gave us podcasting to begin with. But the fact is now, as much as I was sort of, I say I was there, I was very much on the sidelines as an observer, but an interested one. Where we are now, there's so much open access to podcasting. It's so the barrier to entry is so low, but that means it's much easier to make really good stuff. When we talk about low barrier to entry, we often think that just means that the crap stuff gets in, whereas actually what it really enables is for people to make good stuff easier. And so that means people who don't identify, almost if not every single one of the clients that I work with, be it as an editor or as a consultant or as a podcast coach, the people I work with, none of them would define themselves as a podcaster. If it's in their bio at all, it's, somewhere sort of buried. Like, it's not an identity they carry with them. Their podcast is still important to them and they still want to make a really good one, but they don't carry that piss and vinegar that the sort of podcasting subculture has grown up with. And that's where I'd like to see more movement, I think, is to embrace the people that are making really good stuff and want to make quality stuff, but don't necessarily have an opinion on whether they should use a lightning node to accept Satoshis or not.
That's the real question, though, isn't it? That's the fundamental one at the center of it all. I think you are, in a way, you're sort of showing me that maybe I'm a little bit like old school in my thoughts, like, because that's how I really look at this as like my. Okay, so I write some I've written one and 3/4 of a book. It's almost there, and then I've got my other job and I do some freelance stuff. But for me, all of it is in pursuit of getting this into a place where this is the central thing I do, because I really love long form conversation, man, and either I'm gonna stick. Apparently, either I'm gonna buck the trends, or I'm gonna go out with the old school guys before I've made it.
Flame out before. Well, better to burn out than fade away.
Yep. So, to come back then to the Bitcoin-y side of things. So, what is it that they're trying to do with Bitcoin and podcasting? Because I like both of these things individually.
It's a phenomenal idea, but I find it difficult. The actual concept of it is brilliant, and when you look at what they're trying to do, it is great. The problem I have is I have been fairly opposed to Bitcoin and to cryptocurrency. Just based on a little bit based on the culture, but also just based on the fact I'm seeing a lot of excitement about it in the podcast space, which I love, but I don't see anyone. The massive elephant in the room is that it's knackering the environment, and we're not addressing that, and that's disappointing to me. There's a lot of sensible podcasters in the space that I listen to and I follow, and whose opinions I respect. But they're asking people to stream Satoshis to them, and they're not really thinking about the fact that this stuff uses so much energy. And I know there's proof of stake versus proof of work. Doesn't matter. It's not enough of a change. It is. I think it generates a lot more waste and a lot more wasted energy than the problem it solves, which Bitcoin doesn't solve a problem that exists. Bitcoin's a great idea. It doesn't solve an actual problem people have. It's just a really cool idea to have decentralized currency. No one actually needs that. So
I'm going to strongly disagree there, but we'll not get into that.
Excellent. Go.
Okay.
Yeah, you can want it, but I don't think we need it.
I think that. Okay, you might get in on the definition of want and need here, but okay. One of the things that I've become incredibly aware of over the past couple of years, first in my book Brexit, the Establishment Civil War, and then in my book about GameStop, and just learning an extreme amount about global finance and how the monetary system works and how the stock market works, and because I've had the opportunity to interview many like very, very much more intelligent people than myself on this show, and I have come to the conclusion that there is no way that the current system we have does not just end in collapse because of endless printing of money. That's basically what I've witnessed them. I've witnessed the people who are meant to be in charge and the ones who are meant to know better consistently just ignore all historical precedents. Look at obviously there's a lot of factors driving inflation at the minute, but the fact that we printed like obscene amounts of money, it's like, right, you can make the case that was necessary and justified, and it's like, right, fair enough. But you should have known.
No, it's bonkers.
You should have known that is going to cause some level of inflation. And then when I witness like financial newspapers and magazines being like, "Oh, no one saw inflation coming," and it's like, "Are you kidding me?" And these are the people that are also being like, "Well, it doesn't matter that we're just printing money," and it constantly devalues people's like the money that ordinary people have. Whilst it ends like all it does, it seems to continuously like pump the capital upwards, and it is like further exacerbated by all the printing of money, and then it's this awful cycle. And I feel like Bitcoin can at least stop that being as destructive to an economy, because it would at least mean that the currency wasn't inflationary, it wasn't in the control of the people who seem to ignore all the effects of printing loads of it. And would at least decentralize in some way the amount of power that the financial industry has got. And that is why I believe it is necessary. So there you go. There's my...
I get that. I think the problems that you're citing are with capitalism and greed, which I don't think are solved by Bitcoin. I think we get into. I think we will find a way to get into the same system, because I know, like, we have the smart idea of there's only so many coins that can be minted, or that can be mined. Sorry, under the Bitcoin system. But then with the fact that there are different networks and different schemes that people can jump around on, like. Yeah, you'll use up all of that Bitcoin, and then we'll jump to a new system, and then yes, the whole thing will have to migrate to a new network, because we're now off the Bitcoin network and we're onto Bitcoin Cash, or we're onto some other network. Maybe it's faster or whatever, and then the next leap from that is the financial system goes, okay, well, what we need now is, we know that we keep using up all of the resources in this network. So what we need is to build our financial system so that it can survive on any network. And then we just end up in the same problem. We have the same mindset that we will. It's what Agent Smith talked about in The Matrix, when he's got Morpheus in the chair. He's like, you know, we go to a little area and we use up all of the resources, then we move to the next one. I think that's just our nature, and I think capitalism that's what we're seeing. We're seeing greed, we're seeing sort of avarice, and we're seeing like recklessness and a lack of, not foresight, but a lack of wanting to be accountable, a lack of that kind of stuff. And I don't see that changing in Bitcoin. I think there'll just be other ways to route around that issue.
I mean, I don't disagree with what you said. I mean, my argument would be that the things that we are witnessing, that like what you're describing as like greed and capitalism, this is like it is a function of that, right? But I feel that the system that we currently have has allowed so much power to accumulate in the hands of so few. That we cannot, like, that we need to build a way for people to transact and interact that isn't so just entrenched in this like central system. And that doesn't even mean necessarily to me that Bitcoin is like the ultimate answer. It's just the best one I've seen so far. But like, for me, it's a case of I think that we have allowed the system to degrade, because obviously there's that greed and the sort of negative aspects of capitalism. But my ultimate belief is that in a good society, we will keep those things in check, and that we have failed to since about 1980. And that doesn't mean it's impossible. That just means we've been bad
absolutely
at it.
not. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
It's not even that we're bad at it. It's that we don't intend to. That's the problem. The people in charge have no intention of keeping that stuff in check. Because there's always an excuse. There's always the fallback of like, well, our stock, our shareholders demand this certain things, and there's this myth that a company, the fiduciary duty of a company to their shareholders gets twisted to the nth degree so much that like it means they can do anything that they want to because their shareholders demand it. It's like, it doesn't work like that. I understand that I often say things and I'm like, well, this is the fact, and then people are like, well, no, it definitely isn't the fact, Mark. That's just your opinion dressed as a fact. But yeah, I've yet to, and I do take your point, but like I said, I mean, I
could be wrong. I could be totally wrong.
No. It's more just like, I don't know. Sometimes things just have a stink about them, and I think from my perspective, it's like I don't particularly worry that much about what's going on. And I think the blockchain is a really cool idea. I like the idea of a distributed ledger that is a record of these transactions happened. Like that is useful in so many ways. To be able to track anything. Yes, that's another reason why I believe that like we probably need to get out of the current financial system, because it's so rooted in opacity and smoke and mirrors and money being skimmed from places that no one can realize. And you see, I foresee this massive reckoning coming, but I don't know who's going to win or how bad it's going to get or what's going to happen, because like it could be we have a bit of a wobble. And then, some regulations get put in place and we make a few changes and it's all right. And it's kind of maybe sort of stumbles through. But it could go where like everything just like if people who are saying that the system is as over leveraged and as built on debt and as like on the absolute precipice as people like Peter Schiff seem to constantly think it is, it's gonna we're gonna have some monstrous economic crash that could make 2008 look easy, and that's terrifying. And I don't think it's like out of the realms of possibility either. Like when you look at all of the indicators that like just suggest that we're where we were before every other major crash except worse. It's not like positive reading. No. There's the great Muse track, which is the end of my favorite of their albums, I think. Was it The Fourth Law? And it's this track called Unsustainable. And it's a kind of, I think there's a bit of a metaphor for, it talks about the financial crash, but also it's like entropy, and also, and its whole thing is like any system that's based on constant growth is unsustainable, and it's a belter of a track. And it's just, we have got a broken system and no one's looking into it. I mean, I'm not equipped to have this conversation.
Neither am I. And
obviously, I've got opinions. Yeah, but you've spoken to people. I'm just here going, "Oh, this is what I think." But like, if I take it, if I sort of take us back to podcasting, where I feel safe,
yes,
I worry more about, because they're not necessarily thinking about the wider financial services, sort of the wider financial looming iceberg. It is a phenomenally cool way, because what I haven't explained is the actual way that this system works is, I've been talking about streaming satoshis, which are these tiny fractions of Bitcoin.
Of a Bitcoin,
that you stream a set number as you're listening to the podcast that you like, and you can boost, so you can send a few more if there's a bit that you particularly liked. But constantly, you're streaming these tiny, minuscule, amounts of money, and that doesn't just go to one podcaster. You can set up in your feed, in your metadata, you can say, here are all of the people, here are their wallet addresses, their Bitcoin wallet addresses. This is on Lightning, where these people should get paid in these in this ratio, and the apps just do it. And that's amazing. That is such a cool idea, because you as the listener barely notice anything. You'll charge up your wallet every now and again with a little bit more money, $5. And it's that whole thing of, if you look at the number of listeners that a podcast, needs to be successful, or you look at the number of listeners that podcasts can have, and if each one of those just put in a penny per episode, how well off the podcaster would be. And it's not even a penny per episode. But yeah, it's such, I think, a phenomenal idea. And I understand why podcasters are excited by it. We're always looking for ways that we can either make money or grow our audience. Obviously, the concern that I have is that I hear all the excitement and I share the enthusiasm, but I'm concerned because no one is talking about the environmental impact. No one within the podcasting community is saying to people, listen, this is a great idea, but do you really want to back this horse? And I that's what I find really difficult. I feel like it's irresponsible, given where we are with the other looming iceberg, which is the actual fact that icebergs are melting. And I'm not a massive environmentalist. I'm not, as much as we talked earlier about my life coach, moving me to a vegan lifestyle. I'm not like a big environmentalist, but I find it hard to ignore that stuff is there, and it's an issue. And we're bringing more and more people on and creating more and more of these Sudoku puzzles that we make computers solve. And maybe when it gets adopted by actual humans as opposed to sort of Bitcoin enthusiasts and traders and stuff, when like I was gonna say my brother, but he's a bad example because he started buying Bitcoin as an investment. But like, when my aunt has got her Bitcoin wallet, then maybe that changes things. But at the moment, it's kind of like the early days of Patreon. I think everybody's passing around the same $20 between creators.
Yeah.
And it's just that is generating a lot of heat and a lot of energy, and I don't like it. I can't in all good conscience.
I would now this is massive pinch of salt here, right? I would go and look, because as far as I was aware, moving out of China had actually had like a really big impact on the amount of renewable energy being used to mine Bitcoin specifically, actually. And that I had read, and again, massive pinch of salt, that there was something like estimated like 70% of the energy is using is coming from renewable sources at this point. Again, huge pinches of salt. Yeah. And the other cool thing that I'd read about was using mining rigs in either low income or like old people's homes as heating. And the people like, it's a concept being used in like Finland. So they're heating people's homes with Bitcoin mining rigs, which I thought was just genius. So like, especially if you're talking like Scandinavia, you could be like using geothermal power to mine Bitcoin and heat your home. And for me, I think a lot, like I do agree that it's not good if we're pumping out a shit ton of electric. It sounds like a waste of a lot of energy. But
that's because that's what it is. Because that heat is a waste byproduct of the energy. And like, I get it.
And heating your home.
Like, yeah, I guess.
I'm optimistic on the possibilities for it rather than the exact situation right now.
And I want to be. I've spent time trying to watch video essays from different points of view because I want to be convinced. I do, but I don't want to be like sleepwalked into it, or like I want to be discerning. I do want to be persuaded. but I want to be persuaded in a way that I can actually look and go, no, I understand that, I now I understand this. Whereas I have this sort of bad smell and nothing I've watched yet or nothing I've read and people I've spoken to hasn't removed that smell, but I do want that smell to be removed. Because I do think, if that becomes something that we can really make neutral, genuinely neutral with no caveats, I'm like, yeah, let's make this happen because I do see the benefits.
Well,
so, obvious.
Yeah, I think that's a nice place.
But then we have to address the Bitcoin culture, which is just a different thing.
Yeah, but that's just people.
Weirdness.
People are toxic.
That's
about
people.
Everything.
Exactly. And we've already,
But I feel like that's a nice place to finish. Like you want to be persuaded. That's a good sort of metaphor for everyone's life. You should want to be persuaded that you're wrong, because then if you can't be, it means that either you've got a better argument or you're too stupid to realize it. In which case, go have fun with that.
Be curious.
Is bliss.
That's the thing. Like, ignorance gets a bad rap because ignorance is just a hole that needs to be filled. And if you're willing on, oh dear, I've driven myself into a hole here. Like, if you're willing on getting your hole filled, but if you're willing to accept that there are gaps in your knowledge and there are things that you are going to be wrong about, like, that's the only way we grow. It's the only way we have to learn, by getting stuff wrong and sometimes by getting red-faced I think being open to that and just being open to being okay, I was wrong about that. That's a great place to be. So yeah, be curious.
Wonderful. Well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. This has been lovely.
Yeah. Do you want to direct people towards some of your stuff?
Yeah, sure. If I've persuaded you that you want to hear more of what I have to say, then all of my stuff, everything I know about podcasting, I'm slowly every week I'm emptying my brain of that and putting it over at podcode.co. So podcode.co is my little website. And if you're interested in podcasting or you just want to know sort of what's happening, then that's a good place to go. Or otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at @MarkSteadman.
Wonderful. Well, lovely. Thanks very much, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the podcast. If you want to leave us a comment, that would be awesome. Please like, share, subscribe, and if you're listening on Apple, please leave us a review. Until next time, thanks for listening.